Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, Outreach Strategies, Veteran Treatment Courts and Employment Services. My name is Maddie Goldstein, and I am the Program Assistant at the National Coalition for Homeless Veterans. And together with our partners from Advocates for Human Potential, we make up the National Veterans Technical Assistance Center. Before we get underway with the webinar, I'd like to go over a few logistics. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for you to access about 24 hours after it ends today. You can communicate with me if you're having any technical difficulties through the chat box on the GoToWebinar platform or through email. You can find it through any of the registration pages you received. All of your participant lines are muted, so you'll be unable to ask questions over the phone, but on the GoToWebinar dashboard there is a tab that says questions where you can enter your questions, and we will leave time at the end of the webinar for a Q&A. After the webinar, you will receive an email with a link to the recording, slides, and the post-webinar survey. This survey will pop up immediately after the end of the webinar today, and we would appreciate it if you just took a minute to complete that survey to help inform us so we can continue to bring you the voices and information relevant to your work with veterans. I am pleased to introduce today's guest, David Pelletier, of the project director, at Justice for Vets, and from the Maryland Center for Veterans Education and Training, Ron Hill, the program coordinator, and Paul Konetsky, the intake specialist. Mr. Pelletier is a U.S. Marine Corps veteran who served primarily as a legal service specialist with a secondary role as a marksmanship instructor. After being discharged, he earned a bachelor's degree in history with a minor in legal studies from George Mason University, followed by a JD from Washington and Lee University School of Law. He is an admitted member of the Virginia State Bar with work experience in criminal defense, and he served as a volunteer attorney and the fellow at Arlington Public Defender's Office. As the project director for Justice for Vets, he oversees the National Veteran Mentor Corps training, coordinating and facilitating Veteran Mentor Bootcamp. Mr. Pelletier also manages the Veteran Treatment Court Planning Initiative, assisting jurisdictions in the planning and implementation of veteran treatment courts in around the country. From McVet, Ron Hill is an Army retiree who spent 21 years as an Army medic. Mr. Hill worked extensively with the Department of Labor grants to include the Workforce Investment Program, the Incarcerated Veterans Transition Program, and the Homeless Veteran Reintegration Program. Mr. Hill is currently the program coordinator at McVet, and also his colleague Paul Konetsky is on the phone, who is the intake specialist, and he attends the court proceedings, which will definitely bring an interesting perspective for all of us. So without further ado, I'm going to turn controls over to David, and going to take it from here.
Thanks, Mandy. Let me go ahead and set this, hopefully. And if you can just give me a thumbs up that we're good to go.
It looks good.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thanks, Mandy, and thank all of you that are on the line and those that are going to tune in at a future date. Mandy did a phenomenal job kind of giving you my background. One of the things that isn't in my bio, but I talk a lot about when doing these types of training, is that 10 years ago, I began my recovery from substance use disorder, which that recovery was started because of my own justice involvement. I was a justice-involved veteran before there were veteran treatment courts, and actually I had multiple DUIs and was in and out of the court system. And it was that engagement with the court system that kind of drove me to my sobriety and finding recovery. So not only professionally but personally, I'm really passionate about the work that we do, and the work that I know each and every one of you do, working with our veterans and helping them kind of reintegrate and make that transition. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time today talking about veteran treatment courts, a little background as to how they started and what they are, and how you may kind of best interact and function with them. So we'll cover the first two of these, what is a veterans treatment court, and we'll discuss mentoring briefly. The who are our veterans and what are their needs, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. Presumably most of you working in this field and engaging with veterans in this type of work are intimately familiar with some of the concerns and needs, employment obviously being a large one that many of you are working on tackling. Veteran treatment courts really are a hybrid of two previously proven criminal justice models. They're a hybrid between mental health courts and drug courts. They really pull principles from both of those models when working with the veteran population. We do know that a large percentage of our participants are what we call co-occurring, meaning they have both mental health and substance use or multiple mental health concerns and issues. And that's actually what we see in the regular drug court population as well. Where these courts differ certainly is their engagement with a very particular target population, the veteran population. And in doing that, one of the things they're able to do is truly leverage some of the resources that are available specifically for veterans, whether that's the Federal Department of Veteran Affairs or state and local agencies like McVet or your state commission or Department of Veteran Affairs, and then working with volunteer veteran mentors. Again, the target for these courts is the veteran and sometimes active duty population. It's really about leveraging the things about our experience as veterans to help us address some of the barriers that we have that may have resulted because of our service and the things that we learn in the service. You know, it's really telling. The first veteran treatment court started truly out of just kind of a one-off experience. Judge Robert Russell in Buffalo, New York, who had both a mental health and a drug court docket, had a participant on his docket that wasn't responding to treatment and had been in the program for a number of months. Turns out he was a Vietnam veteran, and so Judge Russell asked one member of his staff and another gentleman who happened to be in the courtroom who were fellow Vietnam veterans to step outside and speak to this gentleman and figure out what was going on. And they had a conversation out in the hallway with this man, and really for the first time he opened up about feeling ashamed, about feeling alone, and really not being connected with his community. He was a Vietnam veteran and wasn't engaged with any other veterans, wasn't engaged with the VA, wasn't doing anything really in moving any of his treatment concerns forward because he didn't feel like the people he was engaging with understood him. And it wasn't until speaking with those other two veterans that that connection was made. And so the next time he was in front of Judge Russell, he was standing at parade rest. He was looking Judge Russell in the eye. He was responding with yes sir, no sir. He promised Judge Russell, I will engage, I will do what you ask of me. And lo and behold, he completed the program and was successful and did not reoffend after his graduation. And Judge Russell was a little bit confused, didn't really know kind of what happened, but had a conversation with Hank and Jack, the other two Vietnam veterans, and really through that, veteran treatment courts were born. That was in 2008. The growth of veteran treatment court has been phenomenal. At this point, there are over 300 veteran treatment courts. We've trained about 200 over the course of the last few years, so we're intimately involved with the way these are structured. When we talk about veteran treatment courts, we really, again, have modeled off of drug courts, and we talk about there being 10 key components. One is the integration of the alcohol, drug, and mental health with the criminal justice system, where the participants we know have all of these concerns. We have a population that's guaranteed to be present that we can certainly direct to certain needs. And so bringing all of that together to work collaboratively, and that ties into the non-adversarial approach. Unlike a typical criminal courtroom, you're not having the defense and prosecution argue over the facts of the case. They're not arguing what should necessarily the charge should be or whether someone's guilty or not. The team is working together to find out how best to help the participant move forward. And sometimes that is maybe a short stint in jail or assigning community service hours. And those discussions happen, but the team works together to do that. We talk about identifying veterans early. You have to ask early. You have to ask often. And then the continuum of care, and this really is, for many of you where you would come in, in addition to the criminal justice issues that these participants are dealing with and the mental health and substance use concerns, we know from experience that because of those things, or maybe what led to those things, many are dealing with unemployment or underemployment, homelessness or near homelessness, and a whole host of other issues. So we really have to wrap, almost like the housing first model, right? You get them housed and then we wrap everything else around it. Well, we've got them in the court, now we have to wrap everything around them and provide the other services. It is a criminal court. They are dealing with substance use oftentimes, and so abstinence is mandatory, and that's monitored with frequent testing. Again, there's a coordinated strategy. There's ongoing interactions. The majority of these programs are 12 to 18 months, although many participants take longer to complete all the requirements. And over the course of that, and I'll discuss phases briefly, they will be in contact with the court as well as their treatment providers and supervision, whether that's pretrial services or a parole officer, someone to supervise the actions that they have in the community. All of these things, all of these check boxes, their treatment attendance and finding employment or housing, all of that's monitored and paid attention to, and the court evaluates itself as well. The interdisciplinary training is just in reference to the court staff themselves, and then it's about forging partnerships. Partnerships like you'll hear McVet has with the court there in Maryland. The court itself can't address all of these participants' concerns, so the court needs to partner with organizations and individuals that have the resources and have the knowledge and the experience to address those concerns. Practically, when we're talking about veteran treatment courts, we're talking about this upper left quadrant. We're talking about high-risk, high-need individuals. So when we talk about risk, we're talking about risk for, not risk for danger, but risk for involvement with the criminal justice system. And then need is both mental health and clinical needs, as well as their other ancillary concerns. Which isn't to say that all those other veterans that fall into the low risk and the low need categories shouldn't be addressed. It's just that the level of supervision that occurs in a veteran treatment court isn't appropriate for someone who may not have a history of criminal justice involvement and this was their first offense. They may not need to see a probation officer every single week and take a class on their criminogenic thinking and learn how to not behave in that way. They just need to have their housing or whatever addressed. So you may be dealing with individuals from all of these categories, but those in the veteran treatment court are typically what we call high-risk, high-need individuals. And so because of that, we talked about, I mentioned that we deal with this in a prolonged, extended period. 18 to 24 months typically for your high-risk, high-need. Some courts are slightly shorter. I'm not going to go through all of these, but so that you understand that the way these are structured, the very beginning of a participant coming into court, it's just about stabilization. Many of these participants may have been homeless for 2, 4, 5, 10 years, may have been dealing with substance use and addiction for an extended period of time, and the second time they come into court, they're not going to be in complete recovery and clean and sober and housed. And so the first 60 days is really about just getting them stabilized. And it may be finding temporary housing and starting there. Phase 2, this is more stabilization. Here you may start to see where we're getting now more permanent housing and maintaining. This is where you may actually be engaged with participants at a much deeper level. Again, you can see the amount of accountability and the demands that are placed on the participants in the court program. They are going to be meeting with court a little less frequently, and this is about a 120-day period. Phase 3, again, just stepping them up. This is a little bit of a longer period. They've now coming to court less. They're now starting to engage with their criminal thinking. They've already been working on their substance use or mental health treatment plans. They start establishing a sober network. And again, they're moving through the process. Phase 4, we start moving towards graduation, Phase 5 being the last phase. And again, you can see some of the requirements here. In Phase 5, it's that continuum. It's about making sure that not only does the court assist in establishing sobriety, but really it works towards recovery. It works towards that long-term plan and lifestyle change that can be sustained and isn't just about only abstinence from whatever your drug of choice may be, or only about taking the meds that you may need, or going to meetings that you may need to address mental health concerns, but truly engaging in recovery and having a proper pro-social activities and having a sober network, being engaged in some type of employment, or if someone is unemployable due to a disability or some other concern, that they're engaged in an educational opportunity or volunteering, that they truly are on that kind of community engagement plan. One of the other, I mentioned earlier that this is collaborative. So what makes this different from a typical criminal court, again, where you would have prosecution and defense kind of arguing the case, and if a treatment provider were in court, they would typically be on the witness stand. For veteran treatment courts, they utilize what we call staffing, where everyone on the treatment court team sits in a room to talk about the progress of each individual justice-involved veteran, each participant. And so you can see the veteran treatment court team is made up the judge. Often there's a coordinator. You have your prosecutor, your defense counsel, your VJO. Many of you may be familiar with this position. It's the Veteran Justice Outreach Specialist. This is a federal VA position that falls under their homeless program. And these VA employees are responsible for all of the justice-involved veterans within their region. I can tell you that depending on your area, your VJO may be more or less involved. The city of San Diego has 4 VJOs for the city. I am aware of at least one VJO that covers 90 counties in 3 different states. And so every VJO kind of has a different area and level of engagement. But there is a VA staff member that's there to work with the court and talk to the court about what it is going on with the individual's treatment program. If there are regular treatment providers, community treatment providers, for those that may not be VA eligible, they would also be in the room, as well as probation and law enforcement. And this is where the team is going to talk about what's going on. This is where the team is going to hear that, hey, participant Smith didn't come to treatment twice last week. So what do we need to do? How do we modify that behavior? Because truly that's what these courts are engaged in, is modifying behavior. And so they do that through a series of incentives and sanctions. And so if someone's missing treatment, they may receive a sanction. And that sanction could just be an admonishment from the judge at the bench. It could be that their curfew is increased. You know, instead of having a 10 o'clock curfew, now they have to, be in their home by 6. It could be a short period of incarceration. If someone's going to all their appointments and has been engaged with some type of sober recovery program and maybe has gone on some interviews or some things that are positive behaviors, and the court wants to incentivize those, there's a number of ways the court can do that. Certainly through gift cards, or they can increase someone's curfew to later. They can remove the curfew. They can, tell them they don't have to show up in court twice a month and that it's only once a month. And then the most obvious one is the phase promotion, moving from one phase to the next. And so really it's this structure, this team-focused approach that really differentiates a veteran treatment court and the programming. And then it's about addressing all of the concerns, focused largely from the court perspective on the criminogenic needs, the things that relate to their criminogenic behaviors, and then from the treatment providers, the mental health and substance use issues, but then connecting with outside resources to address housing and employment and those concerns, and really moving the participants from their early stages into sobriety and then into recovery. I'll speak briefly about mentors because those of you engaged with the courts may come across mentors, or they may be the individuals you're interacting with. One of the things that differentiates a veteran treatment court from a typical drug court or a mental health court is the engagement of the mentors. Mentors are fellow veterans from the community, some who may have experienced similar problems, mental health, substance use, homelessness, whatever the case may be, or some that made the transition just fine. But this is a fellow veteran, someone who has a shared kind of experience that the participants can relate to. One of the challenges that we face as veterans in getting help is really overcoming that warrior ethos, that warrior mentality that we had during our time in the service. You know, I know my time in the Marine Corps, it was, you know, pain was weakness leaving the body. Pain was a good thing. You know, you suck it up and drive on, soldier. You don't ask for help. So it's hard for us inherently to ask for help, particularly from those we think may not understand us, those in the civilian community. And so having a fellow veteran there to help us navigate that really can be an invaluable resource. And so the mentor's mission truly is just to engage, to encourage, and to empower their participants. And they do that, they empower their participants by connecting them with the resources, right? The mentor isn't going to be the person who drives them from A to B all the time and actually provides that transportation. They're going to connect them to the DAV in order to help them get to their VA appointments, right? They're not going to be the one to necessarily employ them, but they're going to know who at the Department of Labor, whether that's federal or state, is there to address and help work through those employment concerns. That's kind of the down and dirty. I talked about this briefly. You know, veterans have different needs and unique resources. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the type of impact that war and trauma can have. Veteran treatment courts should not limit themselves to participants that have only had mental health or substance use, you know, as a connection to their service, because truly it's about building on the foundation of their service. It does not require that that's where the trauma or the experience came from. We've talked about this. I'm not going to cover it in the interest of time, but I do want to show you for you on our website, if you are in an area and you're not sure if you have a veteran treatment court, justiceforvets.org, on the right-hand side, you'll see where it says, find a veteran treatment court. You can click on this and it'll give you a map of the United States. Understand we do a survey biannually and do our best to keep it updated, but this isn't going to be as updated. There's a new court every week opening up. I'm training, our organization is training another 25 this year. But if you want to see in Texas, there are 23 veteran treatment courts. And you can click on more information and it's going to tell you, here's the list of the treatment courts. And you can actually zoom out of the map to see where they are. If you click on it, it will tell you who the contact information is and the phone number. So if there's one in your area, give them a call. Tell them what you do. Ask if you can be present when they have court sessions. If there isn't a treatment court in your area, it doesn't mean you can't get directly connected to these justice-involved veterans. Reach out to your public defense organization. Reach out to the defense bar. Reach out to the probation officers, those individuals that are engaging with that population. Let them be aware of your services. That's the largest hurdle, is not knowing who to connect people with. I know as a public defender, I didn't necessarily know what to do with a defendant of mine who, you know, had a housing issue or was looking for employment. I may have had one or two phone numbers, but I didn't have the ability to do that warm handoff. And so, again, if you can do that with veteran treatment courts, that's outstanding and amazing, and thank you for that. But you can certainly engage with this population whether or not they're in a veteran treatment court. So that, I'm going to give that time, but I will obviously stick around and be here for questions. Thank you all very much, and thanks, Mandy, for having me.
Thank you, David. Thanks for sharing, you know, a bit of your story and that great information and insight on the veteran treatment courts and the history of it. I'm just working on changing the screens back over, everybody. Thank you for your patience. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so now we're going to hear from Ron and Paul at the Maryland Center for Veterans Education and Training for our second part of the presentation. Ron?
Thank you, Maddie. Thank you for having us. I was once, for my beginning, I started out as a mentor at the treatment docket court. And once the judge found out about the Maryland Center for Veterans Education and Training, that they were a transitional housing program for substance abuse, and found out we have zero tolerance for substance abuse, she had some interest and wanted to see what the program was even more in depth and what she could do for those who were approaching her at the bench. Again, the treatment program here started here at Baltimore City. We're here at Baltimore City. Judge Haley Weinstein is the brainchild behind the court here. So hopefully today I can give you some type of intimacy on how it actually works, the treatment court actually works with a facility. The next slide. We know that veterans also have unique problems and issues, and sometimes they only manifest themselves later in life. So the first thing we're looking at is whether or not, while that person was in service, the things that they're inheriting and having issues with at this moment, is it something that was military, that happened in the military? So we want to make sure we have that, see if we can have that correlation. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, the veteran document is court supervised as comprehensive voluntary-based treatment program for those military people who are charged with misdemeanors and certain felonies in the district courts. So there are a lot of everyone's not privy to the treatment court. It's not for every veteran. It's not a right to be presented toward the court. So we do have some jurisdiction in who we have and who we can save. The emphasis is really on rehabilitation over incarceration. So being a part of the HPRP, the Homeless Veteran Reintegration Program, which basically we're in charge of housing and employment, our first effort is to eradicate barriers. So in order to eradicate the barriers toward employment or any type of training, we have to emphasize the rehabilitation over the incarceration thing. Now, they're supervised here at the Maryland Center for Veterans Education for up to 1 year. So basically their sentence is sort of shelved for a year, but they must meet the program things that they have to do in order to succeed in the program. We have a collaboration. We normally collaborate again with the justice system and one of our strongest partners with the VA, because we're a recovery center. We're not a treatment center. So sometimes we will bring people in. Sometimes they may have if they have a mental problem, there may be something a little bit more than what we can handle or be able to facilitate. Those people would actually go to the VA. Once they're stabilized and we think that they're ready for employment and training, they would actually come back to McVet and be ready to see a case manager. Again, as I alluded to, they must have a nonviolent crime, or they must be either diagnosed with a substance abuse or a mental health problem. The determination, again, is the connection between, again, the behavior that was in the military, whether it was combat related to a disability, to what they're going through right now and in front of the court system or the criminal system. Again, the veteran, we have to explain to the veteran that they do not have a right to have a case assigned to the docket. That privilege must be earned. And that is really a combination of judge, decision, social workers, case managers, mentors, who all get together and collaborate to find that this person is a good fit. The veterans, once they get to McVet, after the judge releases them to McVet, the veterans here assign a case manager for 90 days. We want to find out for those 90 days, why were you homeless? What are your issues? When were you last employed? What's your demographic? How long you've been out of work? Those things like that. We do a realistic assessment on this particular person. After that 90 days, because we don't talk about employment and training and any of those things until those 90 days are over with. We want to find out where you are. We know where you are. How do we get where you need to be? And what do we need to do to get you there? That is the process. Now, how does it affect McVet? How does it affect the HPRP program? Again, the HPRP program is all about eliminating barriers from incarceration, education, homelessness, age, any kind of economic disadvantage. We want to try to do whatever we can to eradicate those barriers. So the treatment docket actually gives us a methodology for outreach. So we're able to have a dedicated place where we go to every other Tuesday where the court is held so that we can talk to veterans. And if they meet our expectations and aspirations, they're sent to McVet. Now, McVet provides each veteran with an assessment. Once they get to McVet for the HPRP program, we do a realistic assessment. Again, we talk about demographics. We talk about, again, employment. We talk about their history. We talk about how long they were in the military. What did they do in the military? What do they think their issues are? And we try to address those at that particular time. One of the things I think McVet is also lucky is that we have a grant from the Department of Labor. So from the Department of Labor, we're able to provide vocational training, technical training, and educational opportunities. We deal a lot with the trade centers, with the trade schools. We deal a lot with the universities. What we do here at McVet is the Department of Labor has now tasked us to come up with jobs that are have an impact on the H-1B visas, which are those jobs that are hard to not only find, but hard to place people. Because we know that there are jobs out there. It's just that we don't have the skill. The people have not assessed the skill set in order to find those particular jobs. So we're doing a laser approach right now on some of those HB1, H-1B visa jobs, such as robotics, computers, finance, education. These are some of the things that are the medical aspects industry. These are some of the things where jobs are that haven't been trained. We also have a program here where we found out that academia, we're sending people to school, but we also had to bring the employers in because a lot of people were going to school, but once they graduated, they still were not ready for a particular job. So the HPRP program, we decided to get 10 employees along and ask them, what is it that you actually need from a person in academia so they can come out of school and actually get a job. So we all met at the mayor's office, so now we know exactly what happens for the person when they go to school and what they need in order to get a job. Because at the end of this program, we want them to become independent. Along with the McVet program here, we have a great partnership with DLLR, the Department of License and Regulation, who provides, and we're lucky to have an on-site DVOP here at our facility. So we work in concert with the HPRP program along with the state and along with the federal government. So we add all these three entities together to form a partnership which expands our footprint for jobs, for housing, schools, and all those other things. McVet, we also attend the job fairs, and we also have job fairs here at McVet to gauge potential partnerships for future employment. We do the resume writing, mock interviews, job coaching, and every 7 weeks we have a basic computer class. These are some of the things that you have to engage in that we think to help a person become successful. We also, once they attain employment, we also are able to provide them with clothing, tools and uniforms, textbooks, and things of those nature. So those are some of the things that how it affects the HPRP program, and by having the HPRP program, some of the things that we're able to do once a veteran is referred to the Maryland Center for Veteran Education and Training. Now Mr. Paul Koneski will probably tell you a little bit about the intake process.
Yes, thank you, Ron. How do you follow that? David did an excellent job explaining the veteran treatment courts throughout the system. There's really not much that I could add in the terms of that. And Ron just did a good job at explaining how McVet works with the Veteran Treatment Court. I can say that I got my beginning working with the Veterans Treatment Docket here in Baltimore City. I used to be involved with the homeless docket. We do have a homeless docket under the problem-solving court system in the state of Maryland. And Judge Weinstein sat on, she was a presiding judge one day on the homeless docket, and then I got invited over to the Veterans docket to represent McVet there. Now, everything David said is true. We start out when a veteran is arrested in Baltimore City, they are asked at the time of arrest, have you ever served in the military? And then depending on the severity of their crime, they are referred to the Veterans Treatment Docket. They get a court date, and they'll show up there. All of us, there's a bunch of service providers that attend, of course, McVet being one of them. And we all go in a room, just as David said. We sit with the judge. We talk about the cases. And that's where we sort of kind of find out who can service what veteran might be, you know, best matched with what organization, or it could be multiple organizations that work with one individual. So once an individual gets matched with an agency, they get, depending on the track they are, there's a couple different tracks, but depending on the track that they're on, there's different time limits, different sanctions, different things imposed, responsibilities to that veteran. And it's just nice to see a veteran come in, you know, at that first stage, and then see the progress as they go along. And again, as David said, there's different, some of them get gift cards. They get sworn in like they're back in the military. We had our 1-year anniversary recently, which was very nice. A general came in and spoke at the Veterans Court. So it's I can say that Judge Weinstein does a very good job at making these veterans feel that pride that they probably haven't felt since they were in the military. So it's definitely a nice setup, and I think it's very helpful. I can't think of much more to add than that. Maybe if we go to questions, maybe if anyone has a question, I could answer that. Thank you, Maddie.
Thank you all for sharing all of that really great information. And we have plenty of time now for all the participant questions, so keep those coming in, no matter if you're on the line and you think your question is too specific or too broad, or you just need a clarification. Let us know, and we will try and have those answered. I want to start out with, I feel like we've heard so much about some of the great outcomes of veteran treatment courts, and I'm wondering if, you know, you pose the idea of a veteran treatment court to a veteran, what are some of their responses to the idea of this? How do you maybe have to frame it of someone who's skeptical, or maybe everyone's been really willing? What are some of those responses of veterans to veteran treatment court?
I can share my experience because I'm usually on the front line, and not even just with the Veteran Treatment Court, but just engaging in services, period. There's tons of services out there. No, of course not everyone is willing. We may impose our will or want, you know, help for someone, but there's plenty of veterans who choose, you know, not to receive help from the court. That doesn't mean that they won't receive help. But I know in our treatment docket, you know, the docket is voluntary. So if a veteran decides, no, this isn't what I want to engage in, then they just go the normal route to court. What are some of their responses? I don't feel like doing that, or I don't need that type of help, or I'm not ready to stop, or, I mean, it could be numerous different things, but they're always along the lines of one of those answers typically.
And Maddie, I think, and what Paul said is right on, but I think one of the unique things, or one of the benefits with the Veteran Treatment Court is, again, when we're talking about that high-risk, high-need individual, chances are they're not involved with something minor, right? So part of the drive or the impetus for some of these individuals to get involved with the Veteran Treatment Court truly is in that moment, I want to get out of jail today. Uh-huh. And it's not I want to get healthy, it's not I want to get sober, it's not I want a house, it's I want to get out of jail today, or I want to avoid a 3-year jail sentence, right? So, you know, if someone's facing, you know, misdemeanor theft charge and the most that they could serve is, 15, 30 days in jail, well, their impetus, their kind of motivation for going through a pretty intensive year-long to 18-month program may not be the same. So it really depends. It's like that stick and carrot. It really depends on how big that carrot is. What's the benefit for me doing it rather than health? What's the legal benefit? Are the charges going to be dismissed? Many courts do that. Will they be expunged? Some courts do that, or maybe reduced. Or am I just going to avoid jail time? So it really kind of depends on the setup of the court. But it runs the gambit. Some veterans certainly choose. They're involved in the criminal justice system. They're used to it. They can do time standing on their head, and they'd much rather do that. So it really is kind of an individualized decision.
Thank you both for those answers. Next question is, can a DVOP be, excuse me, I just lost it. Can a DVOP be a veteran treatment court mentor? And if so, how would they go about attending that mentor boot camp?
Certainly, one of the, there are a number of courts where the mentors themselves come from a bunch of these different organizations, right? Because we as veterans are already kind of engaged with assisting each other. The boot camp, if you go on our website, you'll see information for the conference. The next boot camp we're having is going to be here in DC on the East Coast in Maryland, coming up in July. We will be announcing 4 other boot camps in different locations across the country this year. That information will be up on our website once we're cleared to do that. And then each court, really the mentoring programs fall under each jurisdiction. So every court may have different requirements as far as what training that they would like for you to go to and those kinds of things. Truly, the training that we provide, we kind of connect with the courts themselves, and then they send us the mentors. It works much better that way as the courts have their own individual requirements.
I got a few more questions here about mentors. Has there been any feedback from veterans who have ever worked with non-veteran mentors? And are there any challenges with finding mentors? But I know you were just touching upon that with the differences in courts, but maybe clarify to those 2 points about non-veteran mentors and any possible challenges in finding mentors.
Certainly. Possible challenges in finding mentors, there's 1,000 of them. It depends on your community. Some of the veteran treatment courts maybe in more rural communities that don't have a huge veteran population, or the veteran population may be particularly young, and so they are currently involved with their families and employment and school and don't have necessarily the ability to devote a particular amount of time for this one-on-one type mentoring. So there are some challenges to that. We certainly work with courts on identifying places where they can recruit, whether it's in CrossFit gyms or reaching out to VSOs, the typical AMVETS, VFW, VVA, or maybe some of the new non-traditional VSOs like the Mission Continues or Team Red, White, and Blue. Mm-hmm. So there are some challenges, but there are some ways to address that. As far as non-veteran mentors, certainly we would never want to discourage anyone that wants to help and address this population. But really the veteran mentor role is really about leveraging the shared community that we have as veterans. I can tell you anecdotally from my own experience, right? I was in and out of the criminal justice system and had a pretty clear to everyone else substance use disorder. I mean, you don't end up with 4 DUIs if you're a casual drinker. And I was in an outpatient program at the time, just not taking it seriously. But it wasn't until a Vietnam veteran, Marine Corps veteran, kind of looked at me and pulled me aside and said, "Hey, Devil Dog, it's okay to ask for help," that kind of gave me the permission to stand up tall again, to be a Marine again and go, okay, you know what? I may have a problem, but I'm going to tackle this head on. Which isn't to say a civilian couldn't do that, but it really is about leveraging that kind of uniqueness. So some programs have civilians that are phenomenal resources and are certainly there and available, whether it's a Blue Star mother or a wife or those kinds of things, that certainly engage with the participants in any number of ways. But I don't think there is a direct substitute for having that fellow veteran.
Thank you. Next question. This is kind of about maybe to the whole case conferencing piece of this model, but where do social workers plug into the work between the veteran treatment course and getting connected to services? How can social workers be most useful in helping veterans who are involved in the justice system?
Certainly. So I think
here McFadden, again, they're referred to the case manager for 90 days. We have 6 case managers here at McVet, and what they're here for, they want to guide that particular veteran. Find out again, I go with the model on where they are right now, where they want to go, and how do we get them there. And that's basically what they're here for, to sort of get that veteran, put them on the right track, and just monitor them as they go along to make sure that they're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think, to echo that, and that's often kind of the way it works out, is that the social workers are a part of some other program that is as opposed to individually, that is working with the veteran treatment court. And so they're creating that kind of case management or that connection with resources in the context of the veteran treatment court, and then an individual from the organization is there representing them on the staffing at the treatment court needs. But as far as engaging with this population generally, really it's connecting with the people who are already interacting with this population, whether it's probation, who sometimes comes from a law enforcement background and may not have a social work or case management background, and they may not know what resources are available. It would be extremely powerful and empowering for a probation officer to be able to pick up the phone and go, you know what, you've got a housing issue, or you've got an employment issue, or you've got some other type of issue. I'm going to call Janet, because Janet is the go-to for that. Similarly, for the public defender or the defense bar, it would have been so great for me to have known particular individuals in my community that could work with some of those things to do that warm handoff. Certainly in some instances, some of the veteran treatment courts, the individual in that staffing meeting is a social worker, and they're representing the treatment team. But it isn't necessarily something, if you are kind of separate from a larger treatment provider or a larger organization, that you would be in the staffing, but certainly identifying yourself to the court as, hey, this is who I am, these are the services I provide, and always helping them build their resources is phenomenal.
Thank you very much for all those answers to that. I got a question that maybe you guys can touch on for just a minute or so. It kind of seems like it's opening the door to a conversation of a larger about the model, but is there ever any room in a veterans court for a harm reduction approach to substance disorders?
So all of the treatment decisions are made by the treatment providers, right? So the court doesn't make that. Now the court requires abstinence in order for their monitoring, right? They have to do urinalysis, they have to do screening, and the reality of it is given the diagnosis of substance use disorder, if that's what it is, then certainly the treatment providers are going to go one way. Now, if someone may not have substance use disorder but has only mental health concerns, and maybe their substance use is just a symptom of the mental health concerns, if that's the treatment provider's plan and that's what's engaged with, then that's where it would go. But I'm not aware of any currently off the top of my head that treatment providers that work in that direction.
I know we spoke about mentors before, but we have a few more questions rolling in about those. Do mentors need to have a criminal justice kind of specialty background or a peer support specialist certification?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
Not to my knowledge. I met quite a few mentors who basically just had the will and desire to want to set another person, it was like a calling. So there was no peer support, no degree, anything. It was just a will to make a commitment.
Yeah, that's exactly right. While if someone has that kind of certificate or training, they may be useful, but the mentor's role is not there to be a treatment provider or lead group or do those kinds of things. They truly are there to be what we in the service, would call a battle buddy. Just another veteran who's there to kind of listen and empathize and maybe point you in the right direction for some resources. And the courts work diligently in maybe getting you up to speed with a basic understanding on how the court functions. But it isn't certainly that you need some type of law enforcement or criminal justice background or treatment background. In fact, a large percentage of our mentors that are really successful don't have those backgrounds at all, because all of those roles are already fulfilled by individuals on the team. And our role as a mentor is not to do any of those things.
If a program or someone is interested in getting a veteran treatment course started in their area, what should they do? What are some of those first steps to finding out about them in your area? I think you showed the map before, but maybe what are some good questions to ask? What are some other things to be thinking about?
Yeah, so we get that question a lot, and certainly if you go to the website, justicereps.org, you'll see my email at the bottom. You can shoot me an email regarding any of these things. But really, you have to have a judge on board, right? This is a criminal court, ultimately. And so if you don't have a judge that's willing to kind of champion this and do this, then there isn't a whole lot of movement. You can't have a veteran treatment court without a judge. So that's a large part. And then truly you need to identify the problem. Again, as a veteran myself who was involved in the criminal justice system, I appreciate that everybody wants this. But if you talk to your jail and ask them how many veterans, come through your jail in any given 3-month, 6-month, or 1-year program, 1-year period, and the answer is 4, well, then it doesn't necessarily make sense to develop these types of resources. There may be some other ways that we can create this same assistance, right? Now, if the answer is, every 3 months we have 1,500 veterans, or even 60 or 30, some significant number, and then we know that those individuals are dealing with mental health and substance use, then it makes sense. That's oftentimes, in order to move the community and the other players, you have to have numbers, you have to have facts. And so connecting with the VJO in your area who may have some of those numbers, or even directly with law enforcement or the jail to find that out is really kind of a first step. And then identifying a judge. But I'm certainly available to kind of walk through that with anybody in more detail, or any assistance that we can provide.
And we would look in that regard because Judge Weinstein, our presiding judge, is an Army veteran. So her interest was keen in the beginning. So the commitment was there. So we really were lucky.
Does anyone have any last points they thought of while answering these questions, or maybe they missed during their presentations that they'd want to share with all of the attendees?
I'd like to add, Maddie, that of course, the whole focus of a Veterans Court is for the veteran in need there. However, as a provider, if anyone is listening to this webinar and they do become a provider at a veterans docket somewhere, you may not get a veteran to work with every time you go to court. And I see a lot of people drop out, or their attendance starts to slow down because of that reason, I think, or maybe who knows what the reason is. But from talking to some people, I hear, well, they never have anyone for me, or something like that. One way that I've made it through some times like that is the Veterans Docket is a good place to network also. Mm-hmm. So you find some invaluable resources there. Dave was talking about, you will meet different people here and there, and I mean, it's true. You meet someone from all different organizations in your city, and then you have someone, at the end of a phone, you can just call up at any time, maybe for any type of service that one of your veterans you may be working with needs. So I just think it's an invaluable tool for one, of course, first and foremost, a veteran, but then two, that you can work together with your community resources in order to form a big, stronger bond to be more supportive for your vets.
Yeah, I would just, follow up with that. What we've seen is that, many communities, the Veteran Treatment Court really becomes the hub of a larger kind of wheel as far as veteran services go. Because the Veteran Treatment Court truly is focused on a very narrow population of justice-involved veterans, the high-risk, high-need individuals, many of those services and those needs are shared amongst the other justice-involved veteran population. But the court has kind of consolidated those resources into one phone tree, one meeting, those kinds of things. So if you can connect with the court, you may see that you end up having a larger interaction because now the public defender knows about your services. So sometimes it works that way, where the court becomes the center and then everything works outward. But even if you don't have a court, again, this is certainly a population that the justice-involved, veteran or not veteran, is a population that oftentimes is underserved and is a challenge. And so anytime that you can connect with the individuals that are engaging with them on a professional or even personal level to provide your resources, your time, talents, and skills, I think goes a long way.
Okay, so in just the last 3 minutes, to all of our attendees, I put up the contact information for the National Veterans Technical Assistance Center if you want to take down that and reach out. And then we had one last question. It was about, what if a veteran has already served their time? Is there any resources in the Veteran Treatment Courts for maybe reducing the sentence for employment purposes?
So that's going to vary by state. It's not going to go through the Veteran Treatment Court. The Veteran Treatment Court truly is kind of the front end of the criminal justice system. While they may have people that are probation violations, it's not the reentry point, right? There are some courts out there, although not Veteran Treatment Courts, that are reentry courts. But every state's going to be a little bit different on the process to have a prior charge addressed, but that typically is in a criminal court setting. And so it wouldn't be held, process wouldn't go through the Veteran Treatment Court.
Great. So I want to say thank you to David, Ron, and Paul for making this a really great, informative webinar, for all of our attendees for making this really engaging with your great questions. Don't forget, right after the webinar ends today, there will be a survey that pops up. Also look for the follow-up email that's going to have your recording, access to the slides, and that follow-up survey again, so you can catch us on further webinars. So we're a little ahead of schedule by 1 minute. Hopefully that gives you all maybe a jump start on your afternoon. But thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maddie.
Bye all.